Hello, everybody, and welcome to Breaking Story with Young Screenwriters. I'm Alexie,
And I'm Theo.
and today I forgot to hit the record button when we first started the show. So, thank you everyone who made it to the right place. We are here now and we are recording. So that is some amazing news.
We did
Uh,
it.
we did it. So, before we get started today, I wanted to quickly kind of go over some announcements. We wanted to give some people some time to find the new stream because, oops. Um, and yeah, just kind of share some announcements about the world. So, one place that we can start is that writing the pilot beta is happening right now. Um, if you're already in it, awesome, and we're so glad to have you. If not, um, you're going to be able to get access at some point after the beta is through. We plan to wrap that up around September 26th. So we are very excited. We've been getting some good feedback from our beta testers, and they have been helping us to make probably like one of our most comprehensive courses to date. We are super excited about it and are learning a lot. And it is what inspired us to talk about a different pilot today. Um, in the course, we talk about Breaking Bad, Succession, Abbott Elementary, and The Bear. And those are obviously four fantastic shows and pilots. And if I talk about them for one more minute, I'm going to implode. So today we get to do some good old CW drama with one of me and Theo's favorite CW shows with a special cat guest, and that is The 100.
I
Which
love the 100.
so I've heard that apparently it is supposed to be The 100, and
I hate that.
I hate it too. I hate it too. So maybe we just go ahead and commit to saying the 100 because
The
that's what it is.
100. Yeah.
The 100. But
I agree.
yeah.
I agree with that. Yeah. I know I've seen some commercials while watching it on the CW where they were like, next on the 100. And I was like, why are they
Ugh,
doing that? It's just, I
gross.
know it gives you the willies, right? Yeah. That's,
I saw it like when all the episodes were still coming out. I saw the actors doing like the Comic-Con circuit and
mm.
all that, and they were always like, God, it's not the 100, it's the 100, and they had to like keep remembering. So it's not just us, you
Yeah,
know?
I feel like if everybody is continually saying the 100, then you should change it to be
Yeah,
what's natural and not like the weird thing that somebody decided one day in a boardroom.
yeah, exactly. If they wanted it to just be called the 100, they should have written out the word 100. That's my vote
Yeah,
on
I
that.
agree. If there's a one, I'm saying the one.
Exactly. Exactly. I'm not I'm not for this. We are officially team 100, and that
Team
is going to
100.
be final. Um so let's see. I guess I know that I was super excited to jump back into the 100. Now I'm going to do it the wrong right way because I'm thinking about it way too hard. But I watched it kind of religiously.
I do too.
Yeah. And then hadn't quite circled back to it in a while. So when it came up as a possibility for us to do today, I was very stoked and very surprised to go back through that first pilot script and realize how much stuff they fit in.
It's tight. It's very tight. And I think that's probably why it was so exciting. And I remember that
Yeah.
first season was like a little like less polished
Yeah.
than later seasons, if I can remember. The thing with being in Canada with the CW is that we don't get CW stuff right away. And I think with the 100, when I started watching it, it was already into season 2. And the way that it aired, we would get it the next day. So there's a deal with Netflix Canada where it would air on like a Wednesday or whatever day it was. And then we would get it Thursday in Canada on Netflix. So I was always like a day behind, and sometimes I would spoil myself on the internet because I just couldn't wait. But I remember it being that thing. It was like a Game of Thrones or like
Yeah.
a Succession type thing where I was always like, oh yes, the next episode's coming up. I've got all my theories, and I feel like getting into that space is really great for me. Like I'm always excited to feel that way about a show.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I remember watching it on the CW's little app, and God, the buffering on that thing, it was, like, not a robust app. It was not very functional, and I'd just be sitting there, like, wanting to watch it immediately. I did not wanna let it buffer. I watched the jerkiest version of the 100
Oh no.
that I think is possible,
I
but
did hear people complaining about the CW app. I have thankfully never had the misfortune of having to try it.
Oh man. So the subject of today that we were thinking about, which was inspired by something that you said a while ago, Theo, the what we're going to look at is the way that the world is a character in the 100, and even in the pilot, like right out the gate, the world is a really strong character in this. And I remember that you told me that every single season it's almost like they have a new part of the world
Yes,
that
that they
become
explore.
yeah, and that was really cool. And so with that in mind, as I was reading back through the pilot, I'm like, we are already on Mount Weather. Like we are already talking about Mount Weather. That is wild. That
But
like
I think they don't actually get to Mount Weather until season 2.
is that what it is?
Yeah,
Because they
I
were
think so.
supposed to go there, right?
Yeah,
That was the
that's where
vibe.
they were supposed to land. And then so I think season 1 is like, obviously we're going to spoil the show. It's old enough. It's past the statute of limitations, but season 1 is like this vibe of like, oh wow, we're on Earth and there are like societies down here and stuff and we have to figure all of that out. And then I think season 2 was Mount Weather. Season 3 I think was Polis. Um,
Yeah.
Season 4 I think was when they were all underground, and maybe season 5 was when they go into space. Um,
It's wild. We
I
go
can't
all
remember
over.
exact. I know. It's like it's weird thinking back to be like, "Oh yeah, oh wow, that happened." And the 100 really goes for it, and I just really appreciated that. Oh, there was the cyber city in the AI. That was a thing too.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I think you're right. It's hard to like reflect back on it and be like, when did they do that part? But they were
It's
trying to
swing
steal
for
all
the
their bone
fences,
marrow and like what was the
right?
deal there?
The black
Like
blood.
yeah, it's been a wild ride. Um but so as a quick breakdown, like a very top level breakdown of the pilot episode, essentially we start with our protagonist, who is the main protagonist of the whole show, even though there's obviously a cast of protagonists, Clark. And she is a 17-year-old girl living in outer space. 97 years before, or something, there was a catastrophic event on Earth, nuclear event, I believe, and the Earth was deemed uninhabitable. So 12 nations, it's like this whole spiel in the beginning. They go up into space, basically. They're living in a space station, and the idea is to wait it out. They're supposed to wait and see when is Earth supposed to be safe. Um, and meanwhile, in this place, in this little space station called the Ark, they have absolutely no tolerance for breaking the law because there's just not enough resources to go around. So, if you break the law as an adult, you get spaced. They send you out into an airlock and kill you. If you break the law as someone who is under 18, as a juvenile, you get locked up. And then when you turn 18, they decide if they're going to send you into space or not. So, that is sort of the vibe at first. And so the whole show kicks off. The inciting incident of the episode is that they have decided that they're going to take 100 of the juvenile delinquents, put them onto a drop ship, and send them down to Earth to see if it's habitable again.
Experimentation.
Experimentation, on the kids. Like, what else are you gonna do with them? So it's this whole drop ship of 100 kids who are going to get put down onto Earth, and they're wearing these bracelets. They're supposed to be able to tell if the air is going to kill them or not. Basically, like, are you going to immediately die upon getting there? And so our protagonist Clark, she we're like with her when she's getting like pulled away. She's like freaking out. She's like, I'm not 18 yet. Ah. And puts on a drop ship, goes down to Earth. And that is the inciting incident of the episode as they get down to Earth. And lo and behold, they can breathe. They are not dead. So all these kids on Earth, and naturally, they've already messed up. The dropship landed in the wrong spot. They was supposed to land by this place called Mount Weather, which is kind of a base that we explore in later seasons. But for now, nope. Middle of the jungle,
Lord of the
isolated.
Flies.
Lord of the Flies, they play the radioactive song. I do remember that. That was something that I remember, was they open up the drop ship and they start playing radioactive. And
the music game was so strong on that show.
it was classic. I will always remember that. I was just like, wow, we're here. And we meet all of these really cool different characters. One of the classics is Octavia, which
she's
girl in the floor. Essentially on the spaceship, you're only supposed to have one kid. This family had a secret second kid, Octavia, and so they hid her in the floor for years and years and years.
Just her whole life.
Just her whole life. They would just stash her in the floor. And then when she was discovered, that was a criminal act, so she was locked up. So she's the only one. People have been locked up for real petty reasons or real serious reasons. She's genuinely just like this sad kid in the floor who is just happy to be out in the world. She's fun. We have her older brother, Bellamy, who snuck his way in there. We have just like a lot of different people who have done a whole range of different crimes.
Which is a great setup, like when you think about it, because immediately we get to know every single character's flaw, like through their crime. Like Jasper, we know like Jasper likes pharmaceuticals. He's he has an addictive personality, or like whatever, like every single person. And I don't remember what Wells is, if Wells had a crime or if Jaha like his dad. So Wells is the son of the chancellor of space. And I don't remember if he is like volunteered by his father to go down or if he actually committed a crime.
I can't remember either. What did he do?
So there's like, there are power dynamics at play with the kids because they all know each other already. They have relationships with each other. Like they're not strangers, which I really love because they're all already have hierarchies and grudges and romances and all of this stuff.
It is, and romances we are going to have. So that's basically the setup, right? And then we go through this whole pilot episode, and it's a 5-act structure, and every act break ends with some sort of huge twist or reveal. And where we basically get to, over the course of it, these kids are like, F the adults in space. Like, we don't want them coming down and ruining our stuff. So they start smashing the bracelets that are supposed to report if it's safe to live there. All this stuff. By the end, one of the last lines is Clark being like, we're not alone.
Because there's an arrow.
Yep. Pachoo! Yep, they get attacked by grounders, as they will come to be called. Basically, they learn that there are humans who have lived down here. We don't get many more details besides just their arrow in the pilot, but that's how it ends. So that is our kick into the new world that is going to be the 100 for the whole thing. Is okay, you're down here, that's great, but there's all these other people who have been here too, who have their own civilization, and whoops. So
whole society, whole history, whole mythos.
Yeah, a whole freaking thing. What do they call DC? They call something Ton DC,
yeah, because it's the end of Washington and the beginning of DC, so it's Ton DC.
Yeah, and the sign got blown off, so they just call it Ton DC. Yeah, and it's so fun. You get to that later, but for now, this is the world that they're in, right? And it's the idea that we wanted to talk about was really how the world is a character in its own right from the beginning. So,
and with the 100, it's not just the kids on the ground, it's that we have the adults up in space and the space station. And the whole thing about the space station is that secretly they don't have enough resources for the people to actually live out. This is why they've put the kids on the ground. It's like, oh yeah, we're actually going to all starve if we don't. And they have we will discover, just like murder people, just to like quell off that whole thing. So we learn through these episodes, through like some very strategically placed flashbacks, I felt anyway, like what society was like in space that always kind of interacts with what they're going through on Earth,
Yeah.
which I think is really compelling. And the thing about CW and those kinds of shows that I always enjoyed is that we had the teenagers, but then we also always had the adults. So there was
Yeah.
like enough drama that was like intergenerational that it like didn't feel like just teenager stakes. It was also like adult stakes and how those interweave as the kids get older and start like taking over and having positions of actual power.
Yeah, that's true too. We do get to spend already, even in the pilot. Again, it's crazy looking back and being like, they really did put so much into there. But you already get the whole dynamic between Abby, who's Clark's mom, and Raven, who you notice is a 35-year-old woman with a kid in
She
this.
is a different character in this pilot than she is in the show. I know, it's like Raven 35.
What?
So I
It,
think they took away the kid. Maybe they put, I don't remember if Bellamy and Octavia's mom is in the pilot. But they took away the kid thing and they made her a teenager, which I think was a smart choice because it's like, okay, now she can, after a time, she can actually interact with the kids as a teenager and not as an adult.
yeah, I remember she is a little older than them, but
Yeah,
not by
she
like
is.
a lot, a lot.
She's
Like,
like 20 or whatever.
yeah, and they're all supposed to be under 18, except
Yeah.
for Bellamy. Bellamy's supposed to be older too because he snuck in to be with his sister because he was a janitor in space.
I like that he snuck onto the ship to take care of his sister, right? Because he's always like, my sister and my responsibility. And that's his whole core ethos that he like literally just says.
Yep.
And then but then, like, when he gets there, he's like, oh, I could have actual power here. Like, if
Oh
we
yeah.
get rid of these bracelets, guys, like, we can just start our own civilization and we don't have to listen to the adults anymore. And that was really compelling for me to be like, oh, this guy,
He
he's
just
just
goes.
going for it.
Yeah, exactly. He's just going for it. And Clark is a little annoying in the first. Like Clark for
Yeah.
me always goes through like waves. Like I have periods where I'm really, really team Clark, and then sometimes I'm just like, girl,
Yeah.
chill. Like,
Yeah. Just
what
relax
are
a little
you?
bit.
What are you doing?
But I
But
like Clark as a character. I do
oh,
because I
yeah,
feel like she's like very intrepid, but she's also like they really nail into Clark and like how much people hate her.
yeah,
And I think
yeah,
that that's really important for her character because if people didn't hate her, if they were always like, oh, Clark, she's going to save us, she's going to do this, then she would be the savior, she would be the self-insert or whatever that character. But they flipped that around a little bit by making everyone like, oh my god, this girl,
yeah. They
we all hate
really,
her.
we really do not tolerate Clark. She's like the leader nobody wants, and
Yeah.
it's a really great dynamic. Overall, she's like an excellent character. I love every beat. Sometimes though, you're just like Clark, just go with the flow. Come on, like let's
Yeah,
just
you don't have to be like this, honey.
yeah. But man, like looking back, there really are so many amazing characters just already in those with the whole Clark Bellamy Octavia, and then
Octavia's my girl. I'll always say it. She's like, and for me with Octavia, I think it's because like me being adopted and then Octavia like being this kid on the floor who like she could never fit in because she was not allowed to like exist in society the same way that everyone else did. Like she wasn't part of society. So I always really connected with her. And what I loved about Octavia was that the first thing that she does when she finds out about the grounders is she becomes obsessed with their culture and she thinks maybe this is somewhere I can fit in. And
mhm.
so immediately we have this connection to the grounder culture and learning about it from like a bit of a different point of view than the other guys. Because the other kids are like, oh my God, these are our enemies. But she's like, no, I want to be a grounder and I'm going to date this boy. And
Yeah, I'm gonna go bang this guy, and this is how it's gonna be. And yeah, she's great. What's his name? Lincoln, right?
Lincoln is his
Yeah.
name. Yeah.
I was like, that can't be right, but it is right. That is what it was. Yeah, it's a really great little story, and it definitely I guess I know that it was based on books.
Yes, there was a book series, but I think it's pretty loosely based. I didn't read the books. I may have read the first one. I can't remember. But I did in my time do like a heavy read of like the overviews of the books and the differences between the books and the shows. And they did change a lot because like Wells, for example, who's the Chancellor's son, is really like Clark's main love interest, at least
Mm,
throughout the first book. So I don't think that a lot of the relationship um dynamics are the same in the books and the shows, and they really like they take the concepts and they kind of run with it. So like where the books are very standard of their time for like a dystopian-ish YA book series, this show takes it and really flies with it and says, okay, we're just gonna go. We're gonna kill people. We're gonna have a good time. People are gonna, there's gonna be music. It's gonna be epic.
I will say that like this predated Game of Thrones, right? And it was like one of the first shows that I ever watched where I'm like, they're just not afraid to kill off people.
Yes.
Like you end up liking someone and you don't know if they're gonna make it or how long they're gonna.
Did it predate Game of Thrones? I'm interested.
I think it did, right? Like, when did the 100 come out?
100 came out in 2017.
The first one was 2014.
Oh, 2014. Okay, I'm looking at the wrong information. Game of Thrones came out in 2011. Yeah, Game of Thrones came out in 2011. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
but
for me,
I do remember, feeling with the 100 that same feeling of like, oh, okay, nobody's safe.
Yeah. You know what? It predated it for me because I didn't watch Game of Thrones until the very like last 2 seasons. So
you were a late bloomer.
I was. I tried it and gave up when Joffrey, killed some people really ugly, really, really brutally. I was like, I can't. So I didn't touch it for like 3 years. But yeah, I remember in this show though, I was just constantly shocked by how nobody was safe, it seemed like.
And the things that they do, I mean, there's like, they eat people for quite a while.
Yeah, they do. They really, really take it far. They take it to places that I'm surprised about. Although, man, Octavia, she did what she had to do. I'll say it. I'll say it. I'll own it. She did what she had to do. And I respect her for it.
Yeah, exactly. And it was a great part of her character arc, to be honest, of this like this constant like, guilt over like, hey, I was the one in power when we decided to eat people.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like also
I should put that on a t-shirt.
I was the one in power when we decided to eat people. Yeah. It's honestly, if you all haven't seen this show, on even knowing these details are coming, I think it is still so worth the watch. There's a lot. And like Lexa. How dare they? Loved her.
They had to.
They had to, but also did they? That's the question.
So here's the thing, is if they didn't, they did in terms of if Clark is our protagonist and Clark needs to grow, then either A, Lexa needs to be gone, or Lexa and Clark's relationship has to not exist anymore in the way that it does. And I think that in order for like Clark and Lexa to have the love, the one, the true, the big thing, there's no way that show could have continued without, it being something. It would have been really contrived. Like, oh, like Lexa has to go far away, or like they can't be together for reasons that don't really make sense. Like I couldn't think of an immediate way. I'm sure there was a way to do it, but the easiest way was like, oh, we need to get rid of Lexa. And also she got a job on another show. So I think that was part of it.
Yeah.
Because she was on The Walking Dead or Fear the Walking Dead.
That makes sense. Okay. Fair
so
enough,
there were lots of like little reasons why that happened. And I totally understand why everyone was so upset. I was, obviously not pleased, but from like a logistical standpoint, I was like, okay, yeah, I get why they had to do that.
Yeah. I remember the thing that made me the most mad though was that it felt so inconsequential. Like it was a moment where it was like, this was a fluke. Like if she's gonna go out, I want it to be something that has more meaning. But I guess there is like a statement to be made in kind of a death just happening
in that world. Yeah.
In that world.
Especially she's the most powerful. She is literally the most powerful warrior, and even the most powerful warrior in a blink of an eye can be gone, right? Like that's a statement in itself. It's not perfect, nothing in this, I don't think nothing in anything in any show is ever going to be perfect. But this show swings for the fences and I appreciate that.
Yeah, it was good. I mean, they really start swinging for the fences the further we go on.
Oh yeah, the later seasons are just wild.
It kind of reminds me of like Supernatural, like where at first you're like, okay, yeah, monsters, we're gonna get more involved. And then you're like, why are we in another dimension with Satan? And like, it's
I
like,
have not gotten very far into Supernatural. I think I watched the pilot and I didn't continue because the fandom kind of weirded me out at that
oh,
point in
really?
time. Well, yeah, because like I'm not going to get into it, but there's a certain segment of that fandom who has a really weird fixation. And that
Hmm.
just
I
always
think I
seemed
know it.
bizarre to me. And I was like, I don't know if I can just dive into this knowing that
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 exists out there or like that this show inspires those things. And um, so I never
it's
did. But also, it's like really alienating, I think, sometimes to get into a show that has like so many seasons and you're
yeah.
just starting, right? Like there's other shows that are like that for me where I'm like, oh yes, I know I should watch the show, but there's 12 or 14 or sometimes even more seasons. And it's like,
Yeah.
that's a lot. That's a lot to commit to um, in this day and age,
I
for
feel
sure.
that. That was the Supernatural was the first show that I watched after I graduated college because I basically didn't watch shows in college because I was just busy all the time. So I didn't watch
Yeah.
anything. And then me and Carl were living together and I was like, what's this? And watched it. And at first I was like, this is terrifying. I'd never watched anything scary. The last time I'd really like watched shows, I was like 18 or 17. And so then I finally was like watching again and saw Supernatural. I was like, this is so freaking intense. And I just kind of fell into it and didn't realize how big of a thing it was. And I
Yeah.
think that
Yeah.
that was probably the best way for me to get into it was without realizing what exactly I had just stepped into.
Right. And I feel like the Vampire Diaries was kind of in the same way, or where where it was like that thing, and it was kind of this progression of like Buffy, Vampire Diaries, Supernatural. There might be a little bit of I don't know which one was first. And my one of my best friends is like she still to this day watches Buffy on a regular basis. Like she has her realm and she stays within it and she really loves that space and it gives her a lot of joy. And I was like super into Buffy, like we both were in high school to like an embarrassing kind of degree. And then I didn't stick with a lot of the paranormal shows because at the time I was editing books, and the vast majority of those books were paranormal romance books. And I got really burned out
That makes
to a point
sense.
where I was like, I can't, if there's a vampire, if there's a fairy, if there is, like, I haven't read ACOTAR, like I just cannot bring myself to do it sometimes. Like Fourth Wing, for real. Fourth Wing was the first like paranormal type or like the first book of that vibe that I've read in like 10 years. Like
Yeah,
maybe 10 years.
that's true. I never got into the whole like I missed Twilight for whatever reason. I was just too
You might have been
stubborn.
you might have been a bit young for it too.
Yeah, I remember that it was like it was a thing, and I remember when the shows were, or I remember when the movies were coming out, but I just hadn't quite. I missed it by like a little bit of time, and I just never got into it. But I knew it was happening. Like I knew that people were saying, "Oh, I'm team whoever," but I never got into it, which is a shame because now Kristen Stewart, I'm like, dang, did I really
She,
miss
yeah.
that whole era?
You know what? But though, to be fair, like those weren't her like finest films as compared to like the stuff she's doing now is really
Yeah.
more her like her vibe or like her oeuvre. But like Twilight came out when I was 15. So I was like right target market and I read so much at that point in time. Like all I did is I would go to the bookstore the weekends. All of my money that I worked for was like all books. I wish I still had all my books, but you can't move multiple places with like shelves and shelves of books. And I remember reading it and being really into it. And I remember introducing it to a lot of people. And then later on, when there were more and more books, like by the time the fourth book came out, I was starting to get a little bit fatigued. And then people kept like being like, oh yeah, well this and that. And then I had to be like, oh yeah, like I've grown out of that a little bit. But when it first came out, I was very much into that. And then by the time the movies came out, it was almost an ironic thing for me where I was like, okay, we're going to go have a good time. We're going to enjoy these movies for what they are. And now, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but people have screenings of Twilight very similar to Rocky Horror Picture Show, where like,
Really?
yes, so they'll have a screening and everyone, like people like talk during the movies and yell at the screen, and it's like very much meant to be a comedic like community experience.
I did not know that. That's
I would
great.
love to. If I ever have the opportunity to be involved in hosting one, I think it would be hilarious because it's like it's a space for like people of a certain generation and a certain style of what they enjoy to just kind of like have fun and play and make fun of like who we were and who we are and
That's
that
so
whole
great.
time.
And I could go like dressed up like it's, 2012 or something.
Yes,
Just like really
exactly. Bomber
straighten my
jacket.
bangs and make sure that they're completely in front of one eye. And
Exactly. Side, side part right down
yes, there you go. Perfect.
into it. Yeah, I think it's funny because I think that those, we're getting real off track, but like this whole vibe though, like in the 100, I think is involved in this of like, I don't know, like plucky teenagers who are working against the system in whatever way possible. Like it doesn't have to be the most ridiculous thing, right? You don't have to be wielding knives and stuff to be working against the system. You can love a vampire, and that is an act of rebellion in itself.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's something that kind of ties together all of the vibe of a lot of these things, like the 100, and then I mean Twilight, but also Hunger Games. Like when we're getting into
Mm,
all like this whole genre of things where it's like teenagers finding love for the first time in horrible circumstances.
yes,
And
exactly.
like that's the whole vibe. And in all of those though, the world plays such a big role to tie it back. It's like in all
Yes,
of these,
exactly.
the world is a very thought out and kind of elaborate piece of the puzzle. Right? Like Hunger Games, the world building is not just like casual in the background. Like it is fully like it fully has its own role in this story. You have the whole like Panem or whatever. Isn't that what it is?
Panem, yeah,
Yeah.
Panem.
And the districts, and by the way, District 12 is Kentucky, and I was always very proud of that fact. And
It's an
yeah,
interesting thing to be proud of, but
that and then Jennifer Lawrence and Josh Hutcherson were also from Kentucky, and so they fit very well. They're from Kentucky in District 12. Felt very for me. And yes, we are discussing the 100. The show is the best. And so here's the thing. We
I
have this
love the pilot.
I know this comment from Mandela said the pilot sort of lets the show down. I thought like retroactively, I was like, yeah, it doesn't start that hard. They are talking about Mount Weather. They came out of the spaceship to radioactive. Like there is there is so much happening in this pilot that I completely forgot about.
It
I'll
sets up,
mm-hmm.
it's doing the job of setting up because we've got like Finn is in there, we've got Bellamy doing his thing with Octavia, we've got Octavia being Octavia.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's just like when you go back, and I mean probably when we first watched the pilot we didn't understand these things of like, oh yeah, these are all things that are going to be really important, but like going
That's
back
true.
and reading it I was like, wow, like all of this stuff is like very critically important.
Like, oh my god, this was the best moment. Here we go. Look at this. We have to. Exterior. The dropship continuous. Close on the door as Octavia steps out, looking around in wide-eyed amazement, because she was the first one to go out, right?
Yeah, she was.
Behind her, the others are waiting, mainly because Bellamy won't let anyone else follow.
Oh.
As Octavia descends the short staircase, we widen out. The ship has come to rest in the middle of a primordial forest. Fallen trees are everywhere, many still smoldering. Taking in everything, Octavia milks her one small step for man moment for several long seconds before finally thrusting her arms out and bellowing,
Was it me? We're back, bitches.
Neil Armstrong had nothing on Octavia. It incites a mad rush from the ship. The stampede forces Clark aside as they just keep coming, reveling in the warmth of the sun on their skin, the scent of real air in their lungs, the sight of so much green. Already we sense something primal happening here, a century of pent-up instinct being released at once. Soon reality will crash down, but for these few moments, the fact that they are young, alive, and on solid ground is combustible. Let the wild rumpus start.
That line is so like that line is first of all is just so good. And this is something that I do in my writing, which I really appreciate. But like that's where the wild things are, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, this script though, like as I'm reading through it, it was just so of its time that sometimes I'm like, ooh, cringing a little bit. But I mean, it worked for what it was. But sometimes I'm just like, dang, that's awkward. That's so awkward.
It was the, you know, it was the aughts.
Yeah, like
Things, you know.
I flagged this to you before, but when I was scrolling through the script, which by the way is in the description for this episode, if anybody wants to check it out, when they introduced Clark, I was like, no, why? Because it's literally just here we go. Clark, 17, smarter than she is, pretty, but not by much, is lost in the drawing. I'm just like, come on. Smarter than she is, pretty, but
Necessary
not by
character
much.
work there.
You know, it's essential. It's essential that we really know that she's smarter than she is pretty, but not by much.
But just a little bit. She's just slightly smarter than she is pretty. But you know, that's a really funny description because it could mean anything, you know? Like
Yeah.
she could be like, you know,
If she's
objectively
ugly.
horrendous and also like not very bright. Like that's what that description could also mean. But obviously they're meaning to say it like she's smart, but she's also like very pretty, but she's smarter.
Yeah.
But
she's
it could
mostly
mean the
smart.
opposite.
They're
It could mean
saying
like this girl is, you know, this girl is D and S and also horrendous.
if you really honestly, we should do a play on that. She's smarter than she is pretty, and let me tell you, she's not that pretty.
Exactly. Yeah. Perfect character description 2023.
Oh man. But honestly, it's like there is a lot of voice in this throughout.
It is a very voicey, you know, I appreciate that. As like the type of writer I am, I really appreciated it. I was like, yes, this is exactly the kind of thing that I like to play with. So I love seeing other people do it.
Yeah, I like it a lot. We also start by breaking a lot of like quote unquote rules, which is like we open with this long freaking voiceover with Clark, right? Where I was like,
I love that voiceover though. I remember
it's
being
really
like,
good.
wow,
Mm-hmm.
this is interesting. But you know why it works though is because it's compelling. It's like, oh yeah, hey, guess what, guys? You know, the Earth is dead. Dunzo. Also, we joined all these space stations and we're like, you know, creating a society up here, but it's not gonna last.
Yep.
There's, you know, there's conflict, there's tension, there's setup, like all of that information was compelling. They could have done it another way, but I think like the most efficient way to do it was what they did.
Oh man. Oh yeah, and then Abby was all like in charge. Man, I'm scrolling through this and just reminiscing, which is probably not the best time for it, but wow, what a show. Honestly. But it's not safe. No, we get reviewed at 18. The rules have changed. There's no prisoner reviews anymore. This gives you the chance to live.
But like so much world building in that, right? Like just in
Mm-hmm.
these lines of dialogue, and they could have made it really expository. You know, they could have made it, well, Clark, you know the rule, you're not allowed to do blah blah blah. But instead, they move past that exposition and just get right into it. And then we're like, okay, we learn through osmosis as we're understanding, like, okay, this is what's going on in this world.
It's so. I'm gonna have to rewatch this whole thing now. So.
Oh, I know the whole show. But like I remember really like enjoying. I liked how every season was really different because that first season was really like figuring out Grounder culture, but especially it was Tree Crew culture, right? And then we learned that like, oh yeah, there's like so many different crews and they all have a different society, and they also have this like language, this entirely like speakable conlang that was developed out of like a slave language, you know, which was like so cool. And then we learn, oh, they have a city, you know, it's like,
yeah.
Not only do they have these like little tribal villages, they have like a legitimate city, and then they have the conclave and like all of these like really cool world building moments. But like we didn't just hear about them, we got to experience it. It was like, oh, we're going to talk about the conclave, we're going to show you it.
Yeah.
It's bloody, it's gory. Here's Lexa and all of her glory.
God, Lexa. She's so cool.
Yeah, the best.
Gosh. But yeah, I forgot that it's all like Tree Crew and stuff like I forgot about all them. Yeah, Andilla obviously. Andilla says, gee, I wonder if Theo and Alexie like this show. No. We hate it. Hate it, obviously. Don't wish I wrote it or anything. But
I'm gonna tell you, I don't remember how it ends, but
God, I remember though that at some point in there I was like, okay, let's it just like kept going. I will say that though. It kind of reminded me of those shows like where it's like, okay, where are we gonna go from now for now? And then they're like to a different solar system. And I was like, really? That's where
I
we're
was
gonna go?
excited by it, you know. I was like, because I was like, man, I was like, how are we gonna, like, the Earth is dead. What are we gonna do now? We're back in
Yeah.
space. And then they were like, you know what? We're at a whole nother planet. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, you know what? We can do a lot with this, you
Yeah.
know? And they really tied it in well because it's not just that they went to another planet. They went to another planet where people from pre the 100 Earth have been. So everything kind of ties together. And they did a really good job of like bridging the gap
They
of
did.
what all that was.
They definitely connected it and made it work in a way that wasn't just weird. But if I ever sit here and I try to explain to someone exactly what happened on that other planet, people are gonna just nope out like immediately because it is just so many layers of like, so you remember that chip that's in the back of their heads, right? The flame. And well, the flame is there too, but it is this time remembering anyway,
It's a soul.
not
It's
bleed
a soul.
up.
But then there was that whole thing with like the one sun that comes out and makes everybody crazy. And like,
Oh yeah. Yeah, they did. They had the sun. Yes. Watch Rocky Horror Picture Show and attend midnight showings. Commune with John. Sounds good. We'll invite John. We'll all go to a screening of the Twilight Rocky Horror Picture Show, and we'll make John wear a wig so that he can match with the straightened
with the bun.
bangs in front of one eye.
Have you ever been to like actual Rocky Horror?
I did. I did. I went when I was young, and my friend tried to make a Lady Gaga meat dress, like out of
Oh,
meat, and he did not. I can't remember if they let him in or not, but it was not
I wouldn't have let him in.
sanitary. It was a poor decision
Wait a minute, you're not sitting in our theater chairs
with bacon, with raw
in,
bacon on him.
yeah,
I would
with
assume
meat
not,
on your body.
but
You
that gives
know,
you a sense
most
of the
people just
era.
dress as like the characters.
Yeah, it was like they all wore stuff from Spencer's, basically. Like the guys that I was with were all wearing stuff from Spencer's. It was probably not a good idea. We were all too young. And yeah, then you were either in Spencer's stuff or a bacon meat dress. So that tells you.
I have my whole costume. Like I have like I've got the maid thing, I've got the wig, I've got whatever. And I actually haven't been able to go for a couple years because it just hasn't worked out time-wise. Like I've always been busy. But it's kind
Yeah.
of fun to go in like a small town because you go in your community and you're like, oh, like that's, you know, the guy who does the radio and he's dressed up as Frankenfurter in lingerie. But everyone's just having a good time.
Yeah. Honestly, it was a really weird experience. I had no idea that that kind of thing happened, and I was just so confused and
Oh, you
so
didn't
out of
know
my
what you were
element.
going into.
I did not know. I had no idea. Everyone was just like, "We're
Did
gonna
they give you
dress
a
up and
kit?
go." No.
Okay, so the way that we would do it here is you get a kit when you go in and it's a bag and it has all sorts of stuff. So there's like a roll of toilet paper and there is
Oh
like
yes.
bubbles, all of the props. There's a newspaper, all of the props you need for the entire show. And then at the front they have like an easel with like the instructions. And so it'll say like what your cue is and then what to do. And they'll like announce it during the show for all of the people because like a lot of the people there are not like diehard Rocky Horror fans. So it allows everybody to like have fun and do the whole thing and have all the materials.
That's pretty great. Maybe I do need to do it again now that I am twice the age I was. Not quite. I'm not twice the age I was. That's an exaggeration. Well, is it? Maybe. Who knows? I guess we'll see. But I think that that brings us to the end of our time talking about the 100, even though We could do a whole series. We could go episode by episode,
Read
one at a
every
time.
comment with the music.
Yeah, and we switch our intro music to Radioactive, and
It's the 100 hour.
and every single time that we start, we say, "We're back, bitches."
Exactly.
And that is our theme from now on.
But to kind of tie it all in, I think something really important to learn about something like the 100 is like kind of just like to have fun sometimes, is like
Yeah.
know your audience, right? Know who's going to watch this, know what they want to get, and also realize that like audiences want to be entertained first and foremost. Like people want to sit down, we all want to sit down and watch a show that is going to like make us have a good time, whether that's to thrill us or to, you know, I'm not even going to get into like what shows like the 100 do, but like, you know, so I think that we as writers should 100% be like feeling these things when we're writing these shows.
Yeah, absolutely. Like there's a lot of joy in the more, not absurd, but like the more like the more far out moments of the 100, like when they really just push it to the extreme, like when Octavia is yelling and going out, like apparently Neil Armstrong was the vibe. You know, they really take it as far as they can. They're not taking themselves too seriously, is
Yes.
I guess what the fun of it is. And it ends up being a really good show when it's all consistent. Like when you know what you're doing, like when you know what this is, and you're able to do that consistently, you can push the limits of what maybe you would think is
Yeah, of
gonna.
like what the genre is, right? Like and you know, Angela mentioned in the comments, but like Stephen King loves this show, you know, like, and he was super into it. And I think it's because like the conflict is great, the characters are great, the world is great, and it all works together in this like really like chef's kiss way where you know, like if you're watching the show and you know the characters and you know that like this thing is going to happen, you can already start to guess like, oh, this is how Bellamy's going to react, or like, oh, Clark's not going to like that. And as soon as the characters feel real, that's special.
Yeah, and they all do have such distinct personalities, and you do know when something happens, you're like, Clarks doesn't like it. That's not gonna fly. Oh man. Well,
Which is just perfection.
I love it. Thank you so much for joining us today, everybody. And I just wanted to say that again, we are right now in the middle of our beta for writing the pilot. So we should have more information for you about that at the end of September. And in the meantime, you can always check out our courses. You can just go to youngscreenwriters.com/courses. And we have 2 free ones, writing the short, writing the scene, and then writing the feature if you want something a little bit more in depth, and soon to be writing the pilot there with it. So,
and also at any time, come to our community, our Discord server, the link's in the description. We talk, we're there all the time. We help each other work through story ideas and problems. Like you can come in and say, hey, I don't know if this is the right flaw for my character. What do y'all think? And you'll have a bunch of other writers saying, oh, you know, what about this? What about that? And it's a great way to make writing, you know, which is such a solitary thing, not solitary. You know,
yeah.
you make friends. It's a support group. It's a bunch of people who also know exactly how frustrating this pastime, this career of ours is, which makes us all feel a little less alone.
Indeed. So yeah, if you want to hang out with writers, come on by and we will be there too. So thank you so much, everybody. And let us know if there's anything you want us to talk about. And we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.